Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Rike Alien 1, which is a folding utility knife with the replaceable blades. Now, a couple of things right off the bat. Number one, apparently these are a style of replaceable blade that you can find out in the wild. I don't know what they are or where you can find them. I've never seen utility blades like these. Perhaps somebody in the comments can enlighten us, in which case I will link them in the description. But this is, a type of knife that some people don't really love the idea of. You're paying a lot of money for the materials of the frame just to have the blade be something, basic. Even if it does, take a weird shape, it's different than the utility blades that we're used to over here in the USA. But this one is a little bit different in the sense that the blades that it comes with two, are made out of M390, which is interesting. This is mostly, I would label this mostly a collector's item that is 100% functional, but depending on your perspective, there might be a little bit of value here, right? Again, it really heavily depends on perspective. But this is definitely an interesting item, and it definitely deserved its own video. Thank you so much to Rike for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. These are available right now. I'll link them down in the description. They are definitely expensive, right? So again, it just depends on your perspective. But they're down there. You can check them out if you want to. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Overall length of the Alien 1 is coming in at about 7 inches on the dot. Blade length is coming in at 2.5. Cutting edge, just about 2 inches there. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom skills you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others, up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. You can see this thing is on the smaller side. Well, let me say this. The thing is so loud in terms of its design aesthetic. And by the way, these are not cast. A lot of people look at those, and I had one guy insisting it could not possibly be milled. It has to be cast. I talked with Rike. It is definitely milled. They are not cast. This is titanium, and in this case, coated. They didn't list exactly what the coating was. I very much doubt it's true DLC. But it is definitely 100% milled, which is wild. It's really wild. We'll take a look at that frame here in a second. Anyways, it is on the smaller side, but if you have this thing in your hand, it's so hard to, zero in on the size when you're thinking about how crazy the design is. Yeah, definitely smaller than knives like the 8020.5. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Closer to the size of the Para 3, and then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action on this guy? It's fine. This whole thing is just a little bit weird. As far as I can tell, and I believe it says on the website, it does run on bearings, but that's not really aiding anything. I mean, whether or not it does. This would be a problem either way. This sort of shark's fin up here is literally just a thin piece of metal. And while it works, it's not what I'd call comfortable. The other weird thing is that same shark's fin comes down here and actually kind of gets in the way of this really thin liner. So, I mean, yeah, it works. You can get it to work. It is not comfortable. It's not a fun thing to manipulate. The only joy I'm getting out of this is how wild the design is. But this is something that I really want to point out to you guys. You'll enjoy it for the same, if you're really thinking about picking it up. You'll enjoy the design aesthetically. But functionally, while it does work, it is kind of annoying to manipulate this thing. But, if you really, really want this to be your dedicated EDC, you'll adapt to it. But I have a hard time believing there's anyone on this earth who's going to flip that and go, yeah, wow, that feels really, really comfortable, right? But you can do it. So there you go. Carry profile, thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is a little thicker than you might expect, but just about, I guess, just about the same as the Para 3. These are contoured. It's kind of hard to tell because there's so much going on, but that is the case there. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. You can see here, this is going to take up about the same amount of room in your pocket as the Para 3, maybe a little tiny bit longer with that little shark fin up there. But yeah, height-wise, not quite as tall as the Para 3. Not bad. You'll definitely adapt to it. It's not a gigantic piece of equipment or anything like that. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. So the body screws are going to be a T6. Let's just take a look here. Right there, you've got this one right here. This is not an integral frame, by the way. There is a seam. You can see it right there. So there's a couple of screws, and these are both, actually that one might even be smaller. Nope, that's a T6 hidden screw right there. Sorry about that, doorbell. So for the pivot, it literally, like, as of right now, it's not tight enough, to where I can't just loosen it with my fingers. But essentially, like, either side of this will unscrew, and you can take a look in here. It is captive, but that's just like a double-sided or a double-threaded barrel. And that's what's keeping that in there. I don't love that. I really wish, because there could be a time where you'd want to take this apart. I don't like that this just seems to be like hand tightened. If you get it too tight, or I guess maybe if you bump it or something, you might not be able to undo that. So I don't love this. It's cool to look at for sure. But I'd still rather that they just, why not just have the middle of this be a Torx head, right? I mean, if you can make this, like, just make one side the captive end, and then the other side the adjustment head, and just put the, a T8 in there or something like that. But the knife did not come with a tool. I checked both of these, this and the gray one. It didn't come with like a proprietary tool or anything like that. So as far as I can tell, you're supposed to loosen it with your hand, which it's frustrating. I feel like I'm missing something here, but I think that's actually what they intended, is to simply loosen it with your hand. So yeah, not my favorite thing in the entire world. But it is able to be taken apart if you really need to. I doubt you'll need to. The only thing you'll need to be taking apart or removing is the blade itself when you want to switch out for the serrated one. But if you really do have to take it apart, it definitely is doable. Let's go ahead and weigh the knife. We are looking at a lot of titanium here, and then you have the M390 blade, which is very, very thin. We are looking at 3.32 ounces, so definitely not heavy, but heavier than you might expect a knife of this size to be. And then the blade stock thickness, it's kind of, it's a razor blade, so I'm going to give you, I guess, yeah, we'll do the blade itself, not the housing. Super duper thin, 42 thousandths. All right. Moving on here, meat and potatoes. Ergonomically, it's a lot more comfortable than you would expect. These lines out, say for maybe this area right here, a lot of this is actually super, super comfortable, which is kind of mind-blowing, right? I mean, I'm still aware of all of this down here, sort of not really poking into my hand. You can just kind of feel it. So if you really squeeze on this, you might get a little bit uncomfortable, but for the most part, it's surprisingly comfortable. You might be wondering, how do you take the blade out of there? And it's probably obvious. This piece right here, which I'm not going to do because there's a spring underneath. I did it right before I, started the video, but essentially you turn this, and it's got ridges right there, basically allowing you to, get some traction. Two reasons I don't like this. Number one, on the, these folding utility knives, a quick release system is ideal. I don't know why so many companies do everything in their power to avoid a quick release system. I love the system that Rike uses on the XOU. I think that's great, even if it can kind of fly out of there. It's much better. This, I don't like this. I don't have to turn it by hand, and I don't like how close it is to that edge, especially when I'm screwing it back in. If I slip, my thumb goes right up on the blade. Not a big fan of that. I really wish that they had something. If it had to be this, I wish that it was somewhere else. I just don't love that system. When you pull this out, you've got this head, you've got this Chicago end, and then there's a spring in there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that just sort of flies all over the place. The knife looks good, it looks cool, and it's definitely going to be one of those things where, if somebody says, hey, you got a knife and you pull this out, they're going to ask questions about it, because there are very few things in this knife roll that look like this. I believe this is a Richard, I think it's Richard Wu, the founder of Rike. I believe this is his design alongside the other Alien variants. I like the new Alien 4, right? Yeah, it's just a little bit weird. The whole frame, like the way that this is milled, is so impressive. Credit where it's due, right? Even if you can say, oh, well, big deal, it's still a machine doing it. I mean, if it were that easy for everybody, we'd see this type of stuff all over the place. There are lots of different, forms that complex machining can take, right? A lot of it is pretty subjective for sure, but this is unique. I have never seen milling like this. It's absolutely wild and ridiculous. I did see, I think a while back, it was an Andre de Villiers design, but I think that was actually in collaboration with Rike, if I'm not mistaken. So this frame and the way that this looks remains to be, super, super unique. It's just really, really impressive. Love it or hate it, it is really, really impressive to look at. As far as using this like a utility knife, yeah, it works really well because it's a very thin little razor blade. Personally, I'm not gonna need the serrated one, but this is when I say, like, for some people it's gonna be it's gonna be based on your perspective whether or not you find value in something like this. The price on this knife is $215, which is a lot of money, right? If you want to reduce it to the simplest thing you can, right? If you want to make the most potent argument, ignore all of the elements here and say that, the simplest thing that you could possibly think up would be $215 for a utility knife. That's the kind of, just sort of empty thought that's going to be associated with stuff like this, right? But you'd have to blatantly ignore the fact that the frame is made of titanium, has unbelievably interesting milling and design work, right? You'd have to ignore the fact that the utility blades themselves are M390, and especially the fact that there are 2 of them. And it gets a little harder, right? It gets a little harder to make that argument. You'd have to go, the argument would be really, really potent if you are making it to a 5-year-old who has no idea what you're talking about, right? Without context, I think that argument makes perfect sense. The problem is it's just not, it's hard to apply that here. That being said, it's a weird thing to wrap my head around because it's such a designy collector style item, right? Had they done this with less designiness and more just straightforward utility in mind, I think it would be pretty epic, right? If you could imagine with me, we don't do the alien milling. We have a quick release system. We get rid of these hand turning pivot systems. Again, if there's a tool and I missed it, or if they just didn't send it, I'm sorry. I don't think that's the case though. We get rid of that, right? And they still give us 2 M390 blades, and they charge $215 for it. Boy, that, for some people, not everybody, but for some people, that's going to be a pretty good deal. So I don't know what the M390 razors are heat treated to. I mean, they're so thin, even if they are hitting that, kind of lackluster industry standard of 59 to 61, they're so thin, they're going to do their jobs anyway, right? And you could resharpen them. As far as whether or not you can get more from Rike, it's confusing. I asked and didn't get I didn't get a response, but somebody asked under a video that they did, are replaceable blades available? And Rike said, yes, it comes with one. So I don't know if they meant, yeah, it comes, like there's an extra one in there, or yes, it comes with one, and yes, we can provide them. I have no idea. I doubt that they would be cheap. You're not going to be buying these things for, $1 a piece or $5 a piece, right? If they are. I honestly don't know though. It is unclear. You'd have to try and reach out to them directly. If you want my honest thoughts on that, I doubt it. I doubt that they will just send out extra M390 blades. But fortunately, these are going to last a pretty long time. And like I said, you can resharpen them, strop them, right? The way that you're going to use this knife, most people I would think, is, I don't know, maybe some people would beat on it. I wouldn't. I would use this for simple cuts, and then I would go back and strop it. Probably wouldn't be pounding on the edge or anything like that, which is kind of counter to the idea of a utility blade, right? The utility blades, the whole idea is who cares what happens to the edge because you can just replace it, right? So, I don't know. Me doubting that you can get like just however many, replaceable M390 blades, I really doubt that that's the case. And if that is, not the case, then it's kind of killing the whole idea here. This is neat and definitely will, it will definitely interest, it'll tickle the fancies of the enthusiast, right? Which I feel like is the majority of people who are going to pick this up and likely the target audience. So less people going out and using it the same way that a standard utility knife would be used. So maybe there's not really any harm in it, right? I think there's a few different perspectives that you can take, but I think at the end of the day, it's just not going to be the knife that most people want to spend $215 on, right? You're going to get a lot of different opinions on this. I think there's a lot of fair perspectives on this thing. But for the most part, it's just very, very odd. Then again, that's what Rike does, right? It's not like Rike made this on accident. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. It's interesting. I think it could be evolved. It just really makes me want like a much more utilitarian version of it that makes more sense. And I want to know for sure that I can get additional replaceable blades. I mean, let me pitch this idea to you again, kind of expanding on what I was talking about earlier. Straightforward, much easier to digest, aesthetic design, something much more plain Jane utility, right? We have the quick release system. We have Torx throughout. We have a better flipper tab. We have a better liner lock area. Maybe they go with something like aluminum instead of titanium to bring that cost way down. And then you can, in fact, get replaceable M390 blades. You can order them in a pack of 10, right? I don't know what that would cost, but, then even if you're still looking at, $150, right? I don't know. But that sounds super appealing to me. I mean, I guess just specifically in this scenario. So, I don't know. Generally speaking, though, do I recommend this knife? No, it's not going to be for the vast majority of people. It's not. There's so many good things you can get out there for $200, right? If you really, really like this, just understand it's going to be a little bit awkward, right? I don't think anybody's going to get this and feel like they bought the perfect knife. But if you're a collector, especially a collector of the weird, this is right up your alley. That's really all I have to say about this thing, guys. Links for this down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.